So I think it's a great time to start getting into college football. End of May, it's almost June, a couple months away from the start of the season. And on this show, we have one of the preeminent college football handicapping minds in the country, and dare I say it, the world. And that's our guy, Ken Barkley, who is just a wizard with this stuff. And the way that we want to attack this here, in lieu of doing actual games right now, because like we need really need a little more information. Ken's got more work to do on it, and I'll leave this to you to kind of explain because it's your thing. You've got a pretty awesome metric that we will debut version 1.0 of here. So take it away.
Yeah, we've done. I think our college football summer coverage the last couple of years on the show has been really, really, really good, and it kind of dwarfs a lot of the stuff that's out there, and it's smart. And this is actually the earliest that we've ever started doing it, which is fun. And I always get really excited. This is not my favorite sport to watch, probably, but it's close. It probably is my favorite sport to do work on, though. It's just really interesting. It's just not a sport that behaves like any other sport. Everything about it is just weird in a good way. Um, so started doing usually Memorial Day weekend is like when I kind of start dusting off everything again and trying to get up to speed with players that have changed places, which this year would take me years to probably get to the bottom of the transfer portal and all the moves and the NIL stuff that goes along with that. So trying to get a handle on that, updating numbers and ratings for every team. And actually the starting point, the thing I usually do first is the thing that we're going to do first for our preview, which is the creation of essentially not a ranking. This is definitely not a ranking, but a score that will be assigned to each team, which was essentially tell me like what their ceiling is this year, basically, when it comes to either make two questions. The conferences have nothing to do with this. Just before anybody asks, it is making the college football playoff and winning the college football playoff. Basically, like creating a list of teams where it's like, all right, I can narrow my focus for those two markets. Every other market wide open. Those two markets specifically qualify for the playoff and win it. Can really narrow the list of teams to pay attention to have the highest ceilings this year, basically. And to help me do that is the creation of a metric that I call talent score. It combine It's basically just a combination of two ratings for how good the players are on your team, which in college football, as you can imagine, is pretty important if you want to win a lot of games. Probably need really good players. Recruiting is a part of it, and returning production. So your ability to get really good players, recruiting, your ability to bring them back into the program and develop them, returning production. Those two things combined kind of gives you an idea year to year of at least like which teams have the personnel to potentially contend for these things. Obviously, coach, quarterback. These are two very, very, very culture kind of like how you develop players. Like Alabama is obviously able to get players to an NFL level of talent and achievement better than other teams are. So all of these are extra considerations, but it's a really good starting point, at least. So we have kind of this year's version of talent score. At least Nick, ready to go here.
All right, so that was a pretty awesome explanation of what we're gonna get. So you bet with Nick and Ken. College football 2022 talent score V 1.0. Ken, take it from the top here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go from sort of like the team that's ranked number one. Now, the important thing to remember is I would not think of this like this is the best team, but to provide some context on if you hear a team mentioned in a specific spot, what that means. The college football playoff started in 2014. That was the first year that we had the playoff that year. So this is the ninth year that we will have the college football playoff. There have been 8 previously with 4 teams. That's 32 teams that have qualified for the playoff, including the 4 last year. We also have the BCS championship games, which I've run this through also. In the last 2 decades, the winner of the national championship, be that through the BCS structure or the college football playoff structure, the winner of the national championship has ranked in the top 9 of this metric every single year without fail. It is frequently higher than that, but the top 9 has contained every winner. So just kind of keep that in mind when we go through the teams. In terms of the playoff, so you think about, okay, you allow 4 teams to come in. A lot of times there's an argument for like balance among the conferences. Like you're not going to have 3 teams from one conference make it, so it expands it to a wider list of teams. You're going to have less good, less talented teams make it sometimes. We're all immediately thinking of a few examples of that, including Cincinnati last year. 32 teams have made the playoff. 23 of the 32 have been in the top 10 of this score, and 29 of the 32 have been in the top 20. So this basically encompasses every team that's ever made the playoff and is going to make the playoff. Cincinnati last year is one of the teams that didn't. 2016 Washington is the worst team that's ever made the playoff by far. They were promptly eliminated by Alabama. And then Michigan State in 2015 is the second worst team that's ever made it. They were promptly eliminated by Alabama also, mercifully, so the title game could be fun and competitive. So that's kind of where we are. If you hear your team or a team that you're interested in the top 9 or 10, that means they seem to have talent to win the national championship. If they're in the top 20, they definitely like in contention to qualify for the playoff. And then once we get those small lists of teams, we can start to ask some really important questions about really like what type of team they have this year. Most important question obviously would be who is playing quarterback, how good are they, what is the ceiling of that quarterback, how good is the coach, is this a coach that you would trust in really important moments and rivalry games, conference title game to get to a playoff? Do they have the pedigree of having made it previously, or do we think that they're on their way there, that they could end up being a coach like that going forward into the future? So like obviously those are very important questions that'll accompany it, but if you kind of listen to that backstory I just gave on how important the metric is or how predictive it is of who can win the championship, and not think of it like a ranking, but just you want to be in that top cluster of teams basically to have the talent to do something like this, then you can see why this would obviously be a great place to start.
All right, so hit us with the top cluster here, or at least the teams at the top of the top cluster.
Yeah, the we'll do it like the top couple here, and then we'll obviously carry this into the next segment. So don't worry, people. Like we'll get to everything. I promise. I'll try to give you the 20. Actually, I wasn't sure we would have time for that, but I guess since I just said that, it'd be a good exercise. Um, this is an interesting here. We might only do the top two before break because they're the most interesting. It is not common that like the best team is number one. The best team is always in the top like tier. Like they're always in the top. Like the teams that Alabama is like in the top 6 every single year in this
Georgia
category.
was one last year, right? If memory serves.
Correct. Yeah. So George. So the ranking of the winners of just championship winners, just to since 2010. Here's the team that won the title. Here's what they were preseason in this metric: fifth, first, third, seventh, eighth, seventh, ninth. That's Clemson 2016. They're the worst, quote unquote, worst team that's ever won. That's the Deshaun Watson Renfro team that beat Alabama. Third, first, fourth, second, first, to give you an idea of like ranking and talent score. And again, it's not really a ranking. I would think of it like you just want to be in the group because there are like the second ranked team last year in talent score, not my rankings, not my power ratings. The second team in this metric was Miami last year because their returning production was off the charts incredible. De'Aaron King obviously came back to play quarterback as well. And obviously the season fell apart for them in a pretty significant way. But this just narrows basically your list of teams to like pay attention to. And then if you want to dismiss Miami because they haven't done anything, you just dismiss Miami and move on to the other teams. You'd probably settle on Georgia, to be honest, or Michigan, who we brought up last year a lot because they were really good in this metric. Michigan had a better score in this metric than Alabama did last year. And a lot of people were like, Michigan's not that good. What are you talking about? And then they, of course, made the playoff. So it's not usually that the best team is number one, but the best team has been number one before. The top 2 teams this year are the best 2 teams by far, which is actually really interesting. Ohio State has the number 1 talent score. They actually have the second best talent score in the history of this metric since I've been doing it. The best talent score of all time is the 2017 Georgia team that lost in the national championship game to Alabama on the Tua touchdown pass. The talent on that team is so stupid, and it was like heartbreaking to see a team that good not win because they were so good. And then all they did was just run it back with like an amazing defense that was legendary this year. So Ohio State is number 1 and Alabama is number 2. It usually does not work this well where like 1 and 2 are so clearly the 2 best teams like most likely to win the national championship. But just like to give you an idea of like what each team is rolling back, this is like the most returning production I have for Ohio State on record almost ever in terms of what they bring back. And I know like people are gonna be like, well, wait, Olave and Garrett Wilson. Yeah, but it's like Stroud and the running backs and the offensive line and a ton on defense and Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was actually their leading receiver last year, not Olave or Garrett Wilson. Like all of that comes back, along with recruits, along with typical Ohio State recruits, along with a change on their coaching staff, a new defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, who's like this really highly thought of guy from Oklahoma State, ton of state changes on the staff. Like they're really locked and loaded this year, like a true worthy team to win like if I had to pick a national championship right now, I would actually pick them. I wouldn't pick Alabama. I think they are set up to succeed, and the schedule would be why I would pick them over Alabama. More likely to get to the game basically than Alabama is. So, and Alabama second, obviously a worthy team with Bryce Young and Will Anderson, who's probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Those are your top 2 teams in talent score. That doesn't make them more likely to win the number 6 or number 5 or whatever, but the 2 that you would absolutely think would be in that tier based on the futures market, those 2 are in the tier for sure. And they're number 1 and number 2 to start the year.
Is the chasm between 1, 2 and the rest of the group this year wider than it's been in the past?
it's probably the biggest. Yeah, the gift difference just in this raw score, and that's before we consider quarterback, by the way, which is Bryce Young and Stroud.
Yeah, two
Like, it's
first
just
rounders in the NFL.
massive. Two incredibly good teams.